Heavenly Father, we thank you for this time we have to come and worship you. We pray that, Heavenly Father, you be with us as we go through this period of study. We pray that you would John tonight as he teaches our lesson and we all learn from it. We pray, Heavenly Father, you do not say that you know we don't have a Father restoring back to the much wanted and needed help. We pray for our country and the leaders that they make the right decisions that we always have. Pray for the ones that are dealing with this heat. We pray that everything will, that no more lives will be taken because of it. We pray that you will listen to us and the rest of our lives. Give us this prayer in Christ's name.
Good evening. I am very much looking forward to our ice cream social Sunday night. And just this is how much I'm looking forward to it. I started practicing yesterday. I ate some chocolate ice cream yesterday just to make sure I'd be ready for Sunday. Are y'all working on that? Somebody's got to do it. I want this to, we need to be prepared, right? What I meant to announce, and it will be floating through Facebook and again Sunday morning, is that, Tammy makes the world's best chocolate syrup. She's going to be making some of that and bringing. Now, if you got some kind of side thing that goes good with ice cream, by all means, please do bring that too. We're going to have a few things to go with and everything, but if you've got some kind of it needs to go with the ice cream, because go ahead and bring it. That'll be fantastic. We're looking forward to it. And again, that'll be all over Facebook and Sunday morning. We want to make sure we get enough reminders out there between now, grocery shopping day, and Sunday evening that folks can get everything that they want. All right, chapter 11 in 2 Samuel chapter 7. Did I say 7 just then, or 11? We're in chapter 11. Chapter 7, we have the Davidic covenant. It's a major turning point in Scripture. It's one of those major events. Really, we have the garden, God creating, the fall, Abrahamic covenant, the beginning of restoration, the Noahic covenant, the promise, right? And then here we have the Davidic covenant. All these things leading us in and through God's redemptive plan in Christ. And this covenant of David is this one of eternal throne. But in the meantime, there's also a covenant of protection built in there. God is going to maintain. He's going to make David this great king. And from him, there's going to be a line of kings, right? And through him, an eternal or forever throne. And after chapter 7, we see David's victories in battle, which God had already kind of been guiding David through that, right? God had been protecting David, bringing him alone as Saul is pursuing him. We have him showing great kindness to the remaining line of Saul and Mephibosheth, taking great care of him. We have the Ammonite king, the new king, the son of the king who passed, acting foolishly towards David's servant messengers that he'd sent to establish a good relationship with him, because David had a good relationship with his father. The king of Ammon's son did not have good friends. They advised him poorly. They insulted David and the nation of Israel, and of course sort of facilitated a reaction by David when the king of Ammon started gathering outside forces to come help, right? Started calling in Syrians for backup, making alliances to go against Israel. Well, David sends Joab and his army to Ammon as a not necessarily retaliation, but in a sense to sort of maintain the status quo, if you will. So that battle worked out in a way that allows for another battle. Maybe the best way to say that. We have the Syrians that drew up in the open country, the Ammonites, the warriors of the Ammonites, out in front of the city, Israel in between. The Syrians fled, and then the Ammonite army saw the Syrians flee. They turned and went back in the city. And then the armies of Israel pursued the Syrians. And so we haven't had what you would call a battle, per se, between Israel and Ammon yet. But here at the beginning of chapter 11, well, that's where we're at. There's still great hostilities between Ammon and David. And so we pick up here in verse 1 of chapter 11. In the spring of the year, the time when kings go out to battle, David sent Joab and his servants with him and all Israel, and they ravaged the Ammonites and besieged Rabbah, but David remained at Jerusalem. In all the chapter leading up to this, everything that's going on between David and the king of Ammon, we get a partial verse dedicated to the ravaging of the Ammonites and the siege of Rabbah, right? The author's got something else on his mind. He's not lining out battle tactics. He's not talking about how it happened. He's not even talking about the details. There's none of that, right? Author's got somewhere else he's going to be. And so in the very first thing, we have one time of year, spring, the spring of the year. That's because in the spring of the year there, you've got pretty weather that you can go fight. You don't do it in the late fall and winter because of rain, torrential rainfall. The rain falls so bad, especially in the geography where they are, that battle is not really an option. It's not a good time to plan for battle. So spring is the norm. And the author even tells us, is when kings go out to battle. David, however, sent Joab. King did not go, right? We see that in the very last line of 11 down here. David remained at Jerusalem. Now, if you're familiar with the chapter, this is kind of a pivotal verse right here. We're thinking David is not where he is supposed to be. And that does seem to be what the author's getting at. He doesn't out and out say it though, does he? He doesn't say this time of year when king goes out to battle, David was supposed to go, but he stayed at home instead. It's not how he said it, was it? He just more or less saying, you know, this is when the kings go out to battle. David sent Joab, his servants with him, all to Israel. They ravaged the Ammonites, but David remained. It's sort of a matter of fact kind of thing, right? He's not hammering on David right here for having not gone. Maybe we're supposed to see that. I've heard a lot of sermons and a lot of Bible classes fuss at David right here. David should not have been at the palace, right? This is out of character. The king is supposed to go to the battle. They're fighting. The king is supposed to be there. I just want to point you back to chapter 10, verse 7. It says this is pretty recent, right? Last chapter, Israel's drawn up against the Ammonites and the Syrians right now. David heard of it. He sent Joab, all the host of the mighty men. David didn't go on that one. So it's not as if this was something that just didn't happen. It's not as if David is doing something way out of character. David is a mighty man, right? We're going to talk about his men of valor here in a minute. He's fought from the time he was a shepherd boy on up to where he is now. Some estimates put him around 50 years old right now. I can't back that up. That's just what I read. So David is either one, he's king. He decides if he wants to go to battle or not. Two, there could be some affairs of state that has to be, that's a poor choice of words, affairs of state. Maybe there's something going on the court docket David needs to be there for. Maybe some other embassy. We don't get backstory, right? That's not what the author's doing, and that's not what's significant to the story. I'm just saying, hammering on David for not going out to the battle may not necessarily be what the author is getting at here, right? It may not be the best place to teach that. Geography-wise, we got MapQuest pulled up here. From Jerusalem to Ammon and over to the capital city of Rabbah is not a great distance. It's not, they're not trekking down to Egypt. They're not going to the Sinai Peninsula. They're not headed up to Syria, Damascus, or anything like that. They're crossing the Jordan River Valley, and they're in Ammon, right? They're not a long way away. This isn't a long way off battle. It's part of the Transjordan, part of it that Israel should have been controlling from the conquest anyway, but they're not. And so this isn't a great distance. However, the author does share that Joab and the armies of Israel, they've ravaged Ammon. The siege is, it's going great. Everything's fine. That's one verse. Now we move on to the rest of the story. This is where the author's trying to get us to, right? God has made a covenant with David. God has shown David great compassion and care and protective. He's protected David. And here we have what we're going to call as the great blemish on David's monarchy, among a couple. This is the first and one of the ones we think of the most. Verse 2, it happened late one afternoon. David arose from his couch and was walking on the roof of the king's house, but he saw from the roof a woman bathing. The woman was very beautiful. And David sent and inquired about the woman, and one said, "Is not this Bathsheba, the daughter of Eliam, the wife of Uriah the Hittite?" All right, so here's the scenario. I did this scenario today, this whole couch thing, right? Lunchtime, I had this turkey sandwich with some tomato on there, some mayonnaise, ate that. And I couldn't keep my eyes open by the time I took that last bite. I was just ready to pass out, right? Afternoon nap. They've been around for centuries, right? So, afternoon nap. He's up, he gets up, he's walking around, he's going to go outside, get him a breath of fresh air because the air conditioner's not working for a couple thousand years. And so he's going to go outside, getting a breeze, and he's there looking out off the king's palace, right, built with the cedars of Lebanon. He's looking out over the city of David, which is down the Millo, right? It's terraced. I wish I had a good picture. I still don't have a good picture of this particular geography to be able to show you how it is. But you've all been in high places where you were looking down on buildings beneath you, right? This is what David's palace is set up like. He's walking outside and you've got houses, another layer of houses down lower, and don't know how tightly packed they are, that they're side by side. You know, modern Israel, they're stacked on each other. I mean, there's not hardly room to walk between walls, sort of thing. But here we have David. He goes out and he looks out, and there's a woman bathing right here. And this is another one of those points now that I've heard preachers and Bible class teachers just bash Bathsheba right here. This makes for a sermon of people not being where they ought to be, putting themselves in bad situations. If David had gone to war like he was supposed to, if Bathsheba had been taking a bath in the clawfoot tub inside the comforts of her own house, this would have never happened. You know, it's one of those deals. People weren't where they're supposed to be. I've heard that sermon. Let's look real closely at the text here. Who is on the roof of the house? Who? David's on the roof of the house. Where's Bathsheba? She's bathing. The author does not put her on a roof. David saw from the roof a woman bathing. David's way up here on the roof. She's down here somewhere. She may have a privacy fenced in backyard. She's got the old tin tub out here, and she's bathing in the privacy of her backyard. Right? We don't know where Bathsheba is. We typically put her on a roof. The author does not have her on a roof. Even when we draw it up in our mind's eye, we hear it talked about, we see him on a roof, her on the roof, and he's watching her from the roof. She shouldn't be up on the roof. Right? Text doesn't say she's on the roof. She's bathing. And we're going to find out why here in a moment, why she's bathing, and it also perhaps explains why she's outside the house bathing. All right? We'll get there in a moment. Here, there's some things going wrong, right? This is maybe the better thing to focus on in the text. One, David's up on the rooftop, and he catches a glimpse of some movement, right? Everybody in here deer hunted, duck hunted. You ladies, all of you, I'm sure, big hunters, or at least are familiar with it. You're on the deer stand, you're in the duck blind or whatever, and you catch movement in the peripheral vision, right? And you look. It's what we do, right? He's up on his rooftop, see something moving. There's a moment there. That moment of time it takes to register what you're seeing. That's a doe. That's a 6 point. That's a big old buck. That's not a child playing. That woman's naked. He could have, in that moment, right, turned and walked himself back into the house. Yeah, but he doesn't. That's the point we're going to make right here, just briefly, is that that was a first mistake, right? He didn't look away, he lingered. All right. The second thing, he lingers long enough to say, she's pretty, she's beautiful. Verse 3, this is when it went from should have looked away, now he's a pervert staring too long, to full-blown stalker and sending to find out who she is. Who is this one I'm seeing down here? And he answered, verse 3, is not Bathsheba, the daughter of Eliam, the wife of Uriah the Hittite. All right, now let's talk about that for a second. Verse 3. That one sentence right there told David everything he needed to know about her. Let me show you why. Maybe you've done this word study here. Sometimes you're searching up people's names and seeing who they are is tedious, but it's helpful, right? Who is Bathsheba? She's the daughter of Eliam. First thing he said. Eliam is one of the 30 mighty men of valor, David's mighty men, this fighting force that really has no equal in all of Israel, right? That we know of, this fighting force of men, these are I don't know who the best are in our military today. Is it the SEALs, or I don't know who it is. He's one of those guys. These are the guys that David fights. They surround him. He's with them when they fight, because he's one of these guys too. They fought side by side with one another. He knows. He knows who her daddy is. Not only that, this guy that he fights side by side with, he knows his daddy, Ahithophel. He's the most respected advisor to David. The text tells us as much. It's going to be in a few more chapters in 2 Samuel chapter 15. You see it again in 16:23. This guy is one of the level-headed guys that David has surrounding him. He knows her daddy. He knows her daddy's daddy. Not only that, they're close to him. These are men that are near David. They've fought together. They've shed blood together. They've been wounded together. They know one another. In the heat of battle, they know one another well. And then we have the husband, Uriah the Hittite, who is also one of the 30 mighty men. So Uriah is a fellow warrior with David. David knows full well who Bathsheba is. He may not have seen her since she was a little girl in grade school, and now he's seen her growed up somewhat, right? But he knows who she is. And the fact that she lives close enough to his palace means that she's someone related to someone very close to the king. There's too much going on here. David knows exactly what's going on. She's not a stranger. Not someone he bumped into out somewhere that, doesn't know anything about him. He knows. He knows her. Verse 4, so David sent messengers. This would be what, the fourth big mistake? He went from looking to stalking to sending for to fetching. He's getting very, very far away, right? He's getting further and further and further, deeper and deeper and deeper into sin. So David sent messengers and took her, and she came to him, and he lay with her. And now she had been purifying herself from her uncleanness. And then she returned to her house. 7 days of purification. And so why is she bathing outside is because if any of that water comes into contact with anything inside the house, unclean. You go outside and you bathe, because if you don't, you mess up, you got a lot of work to do. Right? That's why we have mud rooms built onto our house. We got muddy shoes and boots and waders, and we come in the house. We got one area that's nasty instead of nastying up the whole house. Think of it like that. It's kind of what's going on here. It's just simply a means of keeping things as simple as possible, right? All right, so after this, David took her out. Now here's another argument that is made right now. Why did she resist? We read this text through 21st century eyes, and we look at it as through the eyes of women having the rights there in their time as they do here in our time. She had no rights. She could have said no. She could have been kicking and screaming. The whole way, it matters not. He is the king. What the king says goes. And even had he done this in Uriah's full knowledge, we're unsure what the consequences should have been. The consequences are supposed to be death for David. That's what the law says. Not for her, but for the law. But for him. What we read here, and this is kind of one of the things I wanted to point out here. Often this is taught as if this is consensual. The author doesn't bear that out. There's nothing in the text that says she's okay with what's going on. And oftentimes I've heard this taught that, that she's actually to blame. She was out there in full view of the king. She's leading him on. She is all that kind of stuff, right? The author is not doing that. That's not in the text. That's something we kind of have to force on it to get there, right? So, We have the situation. David has used or exercised kingly authority. He has sent messengers. Now here's something else. Her husband is in battle, right? The king is sending messengers for her. For all she knows, he's bringing news about her husband. They did fight together. They're companions. He's one of the mighty men, right? She may have no clue as to why the king has summoned her, but probably assumes it has something to do with her husband. That fits, that works, right? So there's no reason to blame Bathsheba for what's happening. David lays with her and sends her back to the house. Return to her house. And then in verse 5, the woman conceived, and she sent and told David, I'm pregnant. David sent word to Joab, send me Uriah the Hittite. Joab sent Uriah to David. Uriah came to him. David asked how Joab was doing, how the people were doing, how the war was going. David said to Uriah, go down to your house, wash your feet. Uriah went out of the king's house, and there followed him a present from the king. So we have David sending for Uriah. And is there a moment there? Now, if we were reading this through fresh eyes, we'd never seen or heard this story before, is there a moment where we're thinking, well, David's going to confess his sins to Uriah? Of course, we would probably, let's see, as I think about that, I'm thinking, he would have probably went to the priest. He'd have probably made some sacrifice, a burnt offering, and calling Uriah probably would have been the third or fourth thing down the list of right ways of handling this. But that's not what's happening, is it? David is going to bring Uriah in from the battle, give him an opportunity to go home to his wife, and times will line up enough that no one's going to be suspicious. Right? Nobody will be suspicious. If Uriah goes home, lays with his wife, and 8 months later, nobody's going to think about that. Right? Everything will be cool. Right? Nobody will notice. And that's the plan. So in verse 8, David wants to send Uriah home, go to your house, wash your feet. And that's his intention. He didn't just out and say it, go home. You've been away from home for a while now. Go home, wash your feet. Get comfortable for the night, Uriah went out of the king's house and followed him a present from the king. I wonder what, the text doesn't say, I wonder what kind of present the king gives to the guy who he just took his wife away from him. I wonder what kind of gift that is. I don't know if that's a donkey, if that's a bundt cake. I don't know what that situation calls for. Uriah, however, slept at the door of the king's house with all the servants of his lord and did not go down to his house. When they told David that Uriah did not go down to his house, David said to Uriah, have you not come from a journey? Why did you not go down to your house? And Uriah said to David, the ark and Israel and Judah dwell in booths. My lord Joab and the servants of my lord are camping in the open field. Shall I then go to my house to eat and drink and to lie with my wife? As you live and as your soul lives, I will not do this thing. David said to Uriah, remain here today also, and tomorrow I'll send you back. So Uriah remained in Jerusalem that day and the next. This is one of those instances of reversal, right? David is the chosen one by God. He's chosen out of all of Israel to be the king. He is going to be the king of kings. He's going to be the king that through whose lineage is going to come the King of Kings, the forever eternal king. And yet we have Uriah showing more honor than this king, right? David knew why Uriah didn't go home. There's going to be a passage in a few chapters. I don't know why I did not include this verse in here. When David even talks about the fact that fighting men, all of his men, and it has been their custom to not go home, to lie with their wives or to lie with a woman before, during a battle, when war is going to take place. And so David knew from the get-go. However, we have Uriah the what? Uriah the Hittite, right? Who lives by Israel's custom. right? That's pretty amazing. So Uriah camps out instead, right? He doesn't go home. Now, the first thing he says, Ark, Israel, Judah dwell in booths. David had built a tent. That's what a booth is a tent. David had built a tent for the ark there in Jerusalem. Israel and Judah dwell in booths, and I'm not 100% why he mentions that, unless he is talking about military cohorts or everyone else outside of Jerusalem. Not a great explanation for the statement there, but more importantly, that it's probably contextual here, is that Joab, his commander, and the servants of his Lord, his fellow mercenaries, that's kind of what the 30 were viewed as, the rest of the armies are camping. They're engaged in battle. I can't go home. I'm not going to take these liberties. I'm not going to take my ease knowing that they are out there living like this. So he doesn't. I'm not going to do that. Of course, that's the respectful thing for him to do, the honorable thing for him to do. So David has got to come up with another plan. And so he tells him, stay here today. I'll send you back tomorrow. Verse 13, David invited him, and he ate in his presence and drank, so that he made him drunk. In the evening he went out to lie on his couch with the servants of the Lord, but he did not go down to his house. That's David's master plan at this point. He wouldn't go home because he was tired, wouldn't go home because he's been away from home for no telling how long. I just get him drunk and he'll go home. Even drunk, Uriah had more honor than David. In the morning, David wrote a letter to Joab, sent it by the hand of Uriah. In the letter he wrote, set Uriah in the forefront of the hardest fighting and draw back from him, that he may be struck down and die. This is one of two that I found, two instances where a soldier is sent back with his own death warrant. That is how absurd and out of place this is. We can't overstate how far off the deep end David has gone right here. He's sending a valiant warrior, an honorable man, to die, carrying his own instructions for death. It's going to be hard to get worse than what's happening right here, right? Joab was besieging the city. He assigned Uriah to the place where he knew there were valiant men, and that's referring to the Ammonites. He's where some of their better warriors were. Verse 17, and the men of the city came out and fought with Joab, and some of the servants of David among the people fell. Uriah the Hittite also died. Joab placed Uriah in a likely place to be killed, per instructions from David. Of course, Joab doesn't know why or anything, right? We don't see that included in the note. But Joab did as he was asked, which is going to raise flags for Joab, right? The king is asked to have one of his good soldiers killed by the enemy. So if Joab's thinking anything at all, he understands that something underhanded is taking place here. This isn't right. And he's not asking what happened. What did Uriah do? Well, Uriah didn't do anything wrong to deserve this, right? But there's something going on that Joab just wants to make sure and cover himself. Joab sent and told David all the news about the fighting, and he instructed the messenger, when you finish telling him all the news about the fighting to the king, and if the king's anger arises, if he says to you, why did you go near the city to fight? Did you not know that they would shoot from the wall? Who killed Abimelech, the son of Jerubasheth? Did not a woman cast an upper millstone on him from the wall so that he died at Thebes? Why did you go so near the wall? Then you shall say, your servant Uriah the Hittite is dead also. So we have Uriah at least being sent out the second time by David to go wage war and fight with an enemy, right? This would have been considered a rookie mistake. We should have learned that history tells us that you don't go fight near the city wall, because then you bring all these other opportunities for the enemy to kill you, such as an upper millstone or archers shooting from the wall. And so Joab is saying, yeah, it's a rookie mistake. I did what you asked me to do. I put Uriah in a place he's likely to be killed, right? And so this is a gentle way for Joab to say, I accomplished the thing you wanted, but it looks silly from the outside because we know that you don't do this kind of thing. But what you wanted done is done. The messenger went and came and told David all that Joab had sent to tell him. The messenger said to David, the men gained an advantage over us, came out against us in the field, but we drove them back to the entrance of the gate. And then the archers shot at your servants from the wall. Some of the king's servants are dead, and your servant Uriah the Hittite is dead also. David said to the messenger, thus shall you say to Joab, do not let this matter displease you, for the sword devours now one and now another. Strengthen your attack against the city and overthrow it, and encourage her. All right, let's just back up and pick up on something. Usually when we talk about this sin of David and the episode with Bathsheba and Uriah, we're talking about the adultery committed with Bathsheba, and then we talk about the death of Uriah. But look here, the archers shot at your servants from the wall, and some of the king's servants are dead, and your servant Uriah. Uriah was not the only one who lost his life because the king wanted Uriah dead. There are other servants, other warriors lost their life because David wanted Uriah dead as well. So David's way of letting Joab know that understood and thank you for your service, sir, is to say, thus you shall say to Joab, don't let it bother you. The sword kills one here and one there. It happens. It's all right. Strengthen your attack and overthrow the city. David's little covert way of saying, thank you, appreciate you. Get back to business now. Get back to the overthrowing Ammon again. Not a great look for the king of Israel. Verse 26, when the wife of Uriah heard that Uriah, her husband, was dead, she lamented over her husband. When the mourning was over, David sent and brought her to his house, and she became his wife and bore him a son. But the thing that David had done displeased the Lord. Okay, let's see. The wife of Uriah, Bathsheba, found out that her husband was dead. She lamented over her husband. How long is that? How long is an appropriate amount of time to lament your husband, your spouse? 7 days. 7 days is the period of lamentation for the spouse. So at least 7 days passed. Maybe it was more, but at least, legally speaking, 7 days. The mourning was over. David sent and brought her to his house, and she became his wife and bore him a son. Everything is smoothed over now, right? Everything's fine. He's doing the honorable, we do air quotes, the honorable thing here, right? And then the thing that, now this is where the story is going to turn. This could have been included in the first verse of chapter 12. But the thing that David had done displeased the Lord. That might be one of the more understated statements in the text, because what happens next is more than the actions of a God that is just displeased, right? That is chapter 11. Do you have any thoughts about chapter 11, this situation so far? As it is, we leave David having taken care of the situation, right? All right, we'll be in chapter 12 next week. We get to meet Nathan again. choice to not be here. We're going to pray encouragement from them, Father, that we may be able to be an encouragement, that help bring them